Hello, everyone, and welcome to Feminism Now, the podcast from the National Organization for Women. I'm senior producer Bethany Brookshire. Our theme this season is protecting women in a hostile world. And one of the ways women often seek protection is through the power of the legal system. Unfortunately, society isn't equal, and that can mean that legal protection isn't equal either. Today, NOW's National President Christian F. Nunes speaks with Azaleea Carlea, the legal director of Legal Momentum, the nation's first and longest-running legal defense and education fund for women, about the power and limitations of the legal system in protecting women's rights. Have you gone through the legal system in an effort to protect your rights? We'd love to hear your story. Contact us at feminismnow@now.org. And now, let's get to the interview.
Hello, everyone. I'm Christian F. Nunes, the National President of the National Organization for Women. And as you know, our theme this season is about protecting women in a hostile world. And I think a lot of us can resonate with this season so much because we really feel we're under attack. Many of us might see the legal system as one of the last best defenses of our rights. And yes, work in the courts has done a great deal to protect the rights of women. But we also have to realize right now, we're also seeing so many of those rights being taken away. And the court's not really doing sometimes what they need to be doing. Let's just tell the truth, right? That's what we're seeing. So that's why it's so important for us to speak today to Azaleea Carlea, the legal director of Legal Momentum. Now and Legal Momentum have a really close relationship and go a long way back. In fact, Legal Momentum began as the Now Legal Defense and Education Fund. And it was founded by early members of Now, including Betty Friedan and Muriel Fox. Legal Momentum became its own nonprofit organization in 2004, and we are so proud to continue to partner with them on so many important issues. So I am so ready for this conversation. Azaleea, we are so glad to have you here today. Thank you for joining us on Feminism Now.
Thank you so much for having me. It really is an honor to be here joining you, and I'm so excited for this conversation.
Absolutely. I really love the work of Legal Momentum, and I really appreciate that it really focuses on women. So let's just start off today by you giving our listeners a little bit more information about Legal Momentum and the Legal Defense Fund for Women and what that actually means.
Sure. So, as you know, as I'm sure some of your listeners know, we started out as the National Organization of Women Legal Defense and Education Fund. And like you said, in 2004, we became Legal Momentum, the Women's Legal Defense and Education Fund. And we are the first and longest serving legal defense fund for women in this country. So I feel incredibly proud and privileged to be part of this organization and to carry on the legacy and the incredible work that we've done together and the progress that we've achieved. But like you said, there's a lot of work that needs to be done to really protect and defend, gender equality across the country. We focus on several pillars. We work on economic justice and economic opportunity, challenges for women in the workplace. We work on combating gender-based violence, furthering and advancing educational equity, and of course, the National Judicial Education Program, which fights gender bias in the courts.
Wow. So many important things. Can you tell us a bit more about the judicial part of the work that you do?
Sure. So in about 1980, our vice president, Lynn Heck Chaffron, started the National Judicial Education Program because she was witnessing and writing about and researching so much gender inequality in the courts and gender bias in the courts. Courts, judges, judicial staff just were not getting it on gender bias and how it really has deep and profound negative impacts on how women are treated in the courts. And so she started this amazing national project. A lot of the funding was through federal funding, which of course we could have a separate conversation about, in terms of what's happening right now and how it is in such jeopardy. But it was funded to educate judges and the courts and, everyone involved in that system, law enforcement, prosecutors, on how gender bias is manifested and how it impacts women. And, what we've learned is that as a woman, when you're facing a judicial process, there's a very high likelihood of you not being believed,
Right.
of being blamed. And, and that overlaps a lot with the work that we do on domestic violence and intimate partner violence, stalking, dating violence, all kinds of gender-based violence. And I saw it personally when I was representing survivors. There was so much victim blaming that was going on.
Mhm.
And unfortunately, that is a trend that continues. And I think that we see it now in terms of the backlash to the Me Too movement and how
Absolutely.
it's so hard for women to come forward and to take on these systems that are not trauma informed and were not meant to really adequately handle these issues, in my opinion.
It's like toxic masculinity is so deeply ingrained in our culture that we even see sometimes, everyone, men and women, participating in the victim blaming of those who've been victims of sexual violence. And I think that makes it hard, as long as we have like this system of toxic masculinity that's so strong and getting stronger every day with our current administration.
Yes, it is, unfortunately. And, we're seeing it at the highest levels of government right now,
Hmm.
as I'm sure that you and your listeners and all our partners and advocates, anyone really who's paying attention to what's
Right.
happening in the news, really
Right.
anyone that is following just the horrors unfolding every day, will see that we're living in a moment now where it seems that it's almost a requirement to be an abuser in government. Maybe that's coming across as harsh, but it's true. I mean, we have someone in the highest level of government in the White House right now who's been adjudicated to be an abuser, committed sexual offenses. We have people in his cabinet that have had longstanding credible allegations of
Hmm.
misconduct. Like Matt Gaetz was out because even his supporters were like, "Wait a minute, this guy is a little problematic." We even have, RFK Jr. and Hegseth. These are not the people that I think we want to trust, that we can trust to uphold the protections that they are tasked with enforcing and upholding.
This is such a great point that you're bringing up about like how can people trust this system when the system. I'm going to just straight point it out. Most marginalized communities, women of color, women with disabilities, they face even harder opportunities to get justice. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Absolutely. And it is well settled that underserved communities like women of color, like LGBTQI individuals, like immigrant women, they're already at the margins, they're already underserved, and they are not getting the outcomes that they need from these various systems. There's so
Hmm.
much bias in policing, there's bias in prosecution, there's bias even in healthcare and in education. And so it is a fight. We have to continue to fight. One thing that I will say is that despite all this harmful rhetoric that's coming out of this administration, the law is still there and the
Right.
law can still protect us. And the people that came before us did not go through this so that we can just, sit back and roll over and say, fine. We stand on the shoulders of all these amazing advocates and
Yes.
trailblazers. Whenever I'm having a hard day, and I'm sure that people are having a hard time right now, and I get it, I completely understand. Like, it's very easy to feel disillusioned, and it's very easy to feel that our country and the ideals of this country are slipping away from us. But we have to remember, and this is what our staff and our team, we really come back to our mission. Like, we were founded, and so many of our advocates and partners and coalitions that we're part of were founded because we saw that there was such a need for advocacy and such a need for resistance, and we have to continue that fight.
Absolutely. I want to talk a little bit more about what the legal system can protect and what limits are there in the legal system with protecting women and why we still see these limits in 2025.
Well, the legal system, for all its ideals and for what it can do and all its potential, is still a product of white supremacy. It is
Mm,
still a product
yes.
of a system that was not designed and set up so that women can succeed or marginalized communities to succeed.
Mm.
We have been fighting just to access those systems for so long. Women didn't even get to go to law school really and have opportunities. They didn't get to engage in these systems until, not so long ago. I mean, women weren't even able to vote until, 100 years ago. So we were not meant to be included in this system. And when you have so much inequality and the harmful legacies of this country informing our systems, of course, it makes sense that it's not going to be the solution or the dream that it could be.
Hmm. Women and women allies have fought so long to try to get us to a place that we could finally get these limitations removed, and get protected and have equity in services. But now we see that we are just I feel like we're just regressing so far back to the place where they really don't want to give women any protection or even any rights at this point. I mean, what do you think about that? This type of like erasure that's happening with women and our right for protections.
It's shocking. It's devastating. I mean, I can't find the words to express just how gutted, we feel.
Hmm.
But like, especially when it comes to, reproductive justice
Hmm.
and economic justice, we have all these ideals in this country of individuality and freedom and equality, but the truth depicts a vastly different story. I mean, when you have like almost half of this country living under healthcare bans or healthcare restrictions,
Right.
with like severe limitations on a person's ability to have just the basic bodily autonomy. Unless and until we have basic bodily autonomy, we are not free.
Say that
Unless
again.
no, it's true. Unless and until one can control what happens to their body,
Right.
it doesn't matter, how much opportunity there is in, education or the workplace, or if you're a CEO, or if you are a top leader, or if you're Christian Nunez, it doesn't matter unless and until like you can determine what is going to happen to your body and when and if you are going to become a parent or have a child or not have a child. Unless and until we make basic decisions about our bodies, we are not free. And unless and until, we don't have a gender pay gap, we are not
Right.
equal.
Absolutely.
Unless and until we eliminate these systems that allow the perpetuation of gender-based violence and underserved communities, women, people of color, immigrants, second-class citizens, we are not free. We are not equal. We are not living up to the ideals of what this nation prizes and represents itself to be. So that is, I think, where we really have to double down and triple down on our efforts to ensure that everyone across this country has the right to make decisions
Right.
about their lives and their bodily autonomy.
And just to be treated as like full persons, right? Because it's
Right.
so much like,
Exactly.
piecemealing, segmenting of people where we are not even looking and honoring them as a whole value person anymore. And I want to bring up a case that I know Legal Momentum's famous for working on that I think resonates with what we're experiencing right now. But first, before we do that, we're going to take a quick break to do our action now. Friends, the fog of misogyny these days is so thick, I can't even breathe. Laws are being passed against our inclusion. The new campaigns against diversity, equity, inclusion target women and people of color the most. Now will not stand for that. That's why we are proud to launch a Disrupt Now campaign. It's a nationwide movement to increase awareness of the anti feminist policies that are being put in place across the country. It's also a movement to identify and empower the next generation of feminist leaders and people who will help keep our democracy safe for women, girls, and all of us. So go to now.org and click on that button that says Disrupt Now to join us in our movement. And finally, listeners, before we go back to our interview, I hope you share the show, send it to others, and add to our movement. Thank you so much. And now we're back to the interview with Azaleea Carlea from Legal Momentum. There is a case that Legal Momentum is very well known for, one of historic landmarks and advancements. And this is the case of Sessions versus Morales Santa in 2017, where the Supreme Court ruled that gender-based differences in immigration law, which they were trying to make it harder for fathers to pass the citizenship to their children was unconstitutional. And can you talk a little bit about that case and then how that kind of resonates with what we're seeing right now with this birthright citizenship that administration is trying to bring back up?
Well, I can't even believe we're having this conversation.
Hmm.
It's a matter of basic constitutional law, right? And this is because the Constitution, the framers were very clear that birthright citizenship is guaranteed in the Constitution as a right. So if you are born here, you are a citizen of the United States. And this was in order to ensure that formerly enslaved people who had no rights and were not considered people, they were they were born here, they were American citizens. And to see what this administration is doing and how it's weaponizing and using this really harmful, vindictive language around the invasion that we are supposedly going through right now as a country by people trying to escape persecution and violence and economic injustice and coming to America just for the opportunity, the beacon that America is supposed to be. And the fact that this was already struck down as unconstitutional gives me some hope to realize that our systems are still in place, the law still exists, and there are courts and systems that will uphold truth, and truth still matters. And when we have leaders who are trying to subvert the truth and trying to make the truth into something that serves only their
Right.
perspective,
Hmm.
that's called fascism and totalitarianism. And I can tell you from my own personal experience, I grew up in a communist country. I grew up in Romania. It
Hmm.
was a totalitarian dictatorship by, Nicolae Ceausescu. And I remember my parents and communities at the time being afraid of the government because you never knew what the government was going to do and what it was going to say and how it was going to erase people and how it would, completely dismantle and disappear the truth.
Right.
And this was a government that banned contraception, banned reproductive rights, banned abortion, and it completely took away people's liberties. And I don't want to get too fatalistic here, but I see what's happening in this country. Like we're slowly starting to take that walk down this very, very scary road when you have someone that's saying what the truth is that just benefits their perspective when it's absolutely not the case. And so everyone that's listening, like we're not crazy. The situation is.
I mean, it's crazy, but it's also like, we have to be honest too that he's not bending the truth. He's just straight up lying.
It is
These
lies. Yeah.
And part of the strategy was to remove back checking because he knows that being this constant tinge of disinformation and lies is affecting people. And I think part of the problem I see right now in our country is that people are being so focused on their individualistic ideas and
Hmm.
interests that they're willing to like sacrifice. Well, they don't even care, I guess, is really the way to say it, because they don't care that women are being abused, that women don't have bodily autonomy, that women are facing more domestic violence. They don't care. They don't care that you're creating inhumane treatment to immigrants, Black and brown immigrants more so than any other, but all
Hmm.
of them. I think they just don't care because they're so vested in their own interest right now. And it is a really scary place to be. And it questions me to wonder, what ways can we help the rights of women and what ways are legal amendments in helping the rights of women in this place that we're at right now?
It is a very scary time, Christian. It is, we've heard this so much. Like we're living in an unprecedented times,
Mhm.
and it's just getting more unprecedented and more unprecedented. We're in a constitutional crisis. We're just at the 5-year anniversary of the COVID pandemic. We've seen wars happen. We've seen this, just like you said, just constant misrepresentations, lies coming out of this administration. I think we have to stay strong. I think we have to educate ourselves. We have to educate our communities. And that is something that we are poised to do. We're going to lead on continuing to educate communities across the country about their rights that still exist. The
Right.
laws still exist. And we are going to really amplify those efforts and get people to understand that they should not believe the BS that's coming out of this administration and the harms that they are actively doing. I mean, one of the things that we have done is joined various amicus briefs on various issues. One of which was the EMTALA case, the Emergency Medical Treatment and Labor Act, which was a law that was passed under the Reagan administration, the Republican administration, which just said to hospitals who were patient dumping people because they didn't have insurance, that if you had an emergency medical condition, you had to get treatment for that emergency medical condition. And just the fact that the current administration just withdrew that lawsuit against Idaho and said, we're not going to pursue this, is really sending a message to pregnant patients that they are second-class citizens. Like, it is literally saying, well, you don't deserve the protections of this federal law. And what's really concerning is that RFK Jr., during his confirmation hearings, was unfamiliar with what EMTALA was. He did not know this basic protection that exists in the law, which I might add is our country's only guaranteed right to health care in this country.
Right.
So that is in jeopardy. Then you have the fact that, he can make decisions about mifepristone and how, if that will continue to be accessible to people across the country. That is really concerning. And so we will double down on our efforts to educate and to remind folks that we are here and we are going to get through this together, because there's really no other way.
Absolutely. So one question I do have is, I know you have a hotline, and we refer people to this hotline all the time. And I think it's really helpful because we know, like, legal jargon and the court system can be very scary or confusing for people. Can you tell us a little bit more about how the hotline steps into this place?
Sure. So we operate a helpline. It's a national helpline. People can call and get advice and information about various legal issues that they may be facing. And I will say, as a side note about our helpline, we have partners that receive federal funding that actually had to remove the links from their website that refer people to our helpline, because it is the Gender Equality Helpline. And people are so afraid right now and are being censored. And since we have the word gender in our helpline and in our mission statement, people are very scared. But I want people to know that we are still here. We will still take your calls, and we welcome your calls, and we are here to help and provide any information and support, advice that people may need, because we do get cases that way too. We have several cases right now that came from the helpline that involve representing survivors of gender-based violence in discrimination claims in employment arising out of their status as a victim. So, it is active, it is still up, it's still operational, and we encourage people to call if they have questions.
And thank you all too for just holding strong to your commitment, to gender justice and women's rights, and not wavering on what we're hearing coming from the administration. Because unfortunately, we're seeing some organizations that victims and people have trusted start removing their language as well. And I just feel like everyone needs to take a step back and stop, because that is breaking their trust, and that is jeopardizing the integrity of the organization when we were so quickly to move in fear. So thank you all for holding to it.
Of course. And we understand that people are afraid right now, and that's what's behind this. But this is an effort to silence advocates, silence survivors, silence our most marginalized communities. And, that's what dictators do. And now is the time more than ever to reach out and get involved in your local communities and local advocacy organizations and really step up, because, this fight is far from over. And this fight, while it seems to be an uphill fight, we will prevail, because I don't think that the American people or anyone that cares about equality and equity and justice and really the ideals that this country holds so dear is going to sit back and let this happen.
Yes, absolutely. Oh my goodness. I have so many other thoughts and questions I could go on for. But before we do, we always like to end with just something that we could tell our listeners. And you just provided us some, get involved and things like that. But for those who might actually be experiencing harassment or violence or any type of injustices, what is something we can tell them, or if they know someone who's experiencing that, to make sure that they are protecting themselves and their loved ones in this time?
The first thing is, you are not alone. help is available. Resources are available. We have so many resources, for example, just on our website. We're constantly updating those and we're issuing new guidance as things change and evolve. So the first piece of advice would be just to educate yourselves and educate your communities and your family members. That is key. And just to contact us and stay engaged with us, stay engaged with our work, sign up for our newsletter, and realize that we have your back. We're in your corner.
Thank you so much, Azaleea Carlea, the legal director of Legal Momentum. It's just such important information you share today. I think it'll give some listeners some peace that y'all are still there for us. You're still fighting and that you recognize what's constitutional, what's unconstitutional, and that y'all are not backing down. I think this will give a lot of listeners peace. So thank you for coming on and sharing. Is there any way that you can tell them how they can get a hold of Legal Momentum as we're ending the show?
Just go to our website, legalmomentum.org. You'll find out about ways you can get involved, the resources available, the helpline, everything's there. So please check us out and contact us and stay engaged. And we have socials. You can engage with us that way, follow our content, and just, reach out anytime. We are here.
All right. Thank you so much. And on that note, we will see you in 2 weeks. Thank you for joining.
Thank you so much for joining us on the podcast this week as we talk about how the legal system does and doesn't protect women's rights. If you learned something new, why not share this episode with your friends? Please like and subscribe to the show. You can also send us your thoughts and questions at feminismnow@now.org. Head to now.org to read up on Now's core issues and our approach to advancing women's equality. Together, we can make a difference. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you soon.